Imagine being so close to power that you attend the King of England during his most private, vulnerable moments, not as a lowly servant, but as a trusted nobleman, a knight of the realm who commands respect and envy throughout the court. Imagine that your daily duty involves attending to His Majesty's bowel movements, wiping the royal bottom, monitoring the royal excrement for signs of illness. And yet this work that sounds absurd or degrading to modern ears, makes you one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. This was the reality of the Groom of the Stool, a position that existed in English royal courts from the 1500s through the 1700s, reaching its peak of influence under the Tudor monarchs. The Groom of the Stool was no mere servant. He was always a nobleman, often a knight, sometimes even a peer of the realm. He controlled the king's private finances, managed secret correspondence, and most importantly, he had something no other courtier could claim: hours of daily private access to the monarch's ear during moments when the king was stripped of ceremony and pretense, reduced to the universal human need that affects peasant and prince alike. Today, we follow Sir Thomas Heneage through a single April day in 1536 at Hampton Court Palace, as he serves King Henry VIII during one of the most dangerous periods in Tudor history, just weeks before Anne Boleyn's arrest and execution, when paranoia runs high and proximity to power could mean either extraordinary influence or sudden death. Welcome to Yawnworthy Jobs for Sleep, where we explore the remarkable work that has shaped human history. Tonight, we're entering the Tudor court, that glittering, dangerous world where ambition and fear walked hand in hand, where royal favor could elevate a family to greatness or destroy it utterly, and where the most intimate service to the king's body became a pathway to political power. So settle in, let your breathing deepen and slow, adjust your pillows to perfect comfort, and join us in exploring a profession that demonstrates a profound truth. Power flows not just from ceremony and grandeur, but from the quiet intimacy of being present during someone's most vulnerable moments. Sir Thomas Heneage wakes before dawn in his chambers within Hampton Court Palace, in the section reserved for members of the Privy Chamber, the king's most intimate attendants. His rooms are comfortable, befitting a knight and gentleman of means, with a proper bed hung with curtains, a brazier for warmth, carved furniture, and tapestries on the walls. He's 42 years old, a man who's served at court for over a decade, who's navigated the treacherous waters of royal favor and survived where others have drowned. He rose through various positions in the royal household through a combination of competence, discretion, and the patronage of Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister, until 3 years ago when he was appointed to the position he now holds, Groom of the Stool to His Majesty King Henry VIII. The title sounds strange to modern ears, almost comical, but there's nothing funny about the power it represents. The Groom of the Stool, named for the close stool, the portable toilet used by royalty, is the most intimate of the king's servants, responsible for attending His Majesty during the daily rituals of excretion and cleansing. But the position encompasses far more than toilet attendance. The Groom of the Stool manages the king's private finances, the privy purse that funds everything from gambling debts to secret gifts. He reads the king's personal correspondence before anyone else sees it. He controls access to the king's private chambers, and most valuably, he spends hours each day alone with the monarch. During those unguarded moments when ceremony is stripped away, and the king is simply a man dealing with his body's needs, Sir Thomas rises and dresses carefully in the pre-dawn darkness, assisted by his own servant, a gentleman usher, who helps with the elaborate process of Tudor dressing. He wears fine clothing befitting his station, a shirt of white linen, a doublet of dark blue velvet with silver buttons, trunk hose, and a gown lined with fur against the April morning chill. Around his neck hangs a gold chain, mark of royal favor, and on his finger sits a ring that once belonged to the king's late mother, a gift from Henry himself during a moment of particular affection. These tokens matter at court, visible proof of the king's regard, armor against the envy and plotting of rivals. By 6 o'clock, He's making his way through the palace's warren of chambers and corridors, past the great hall, where servants are already stirring, toward the king's private apartments in the heart of Hampton Court. The palace is a magnificent structure, Cardinal Wolsey's former residence seized by the king and expanded into a residence of over 1,000 rooms. Even at this early hour, the place bustles with activity. Grooms tending fires, servants carrying water, kitchen staff preparing the day's meals. Sir Thomas passes them all with barely a glance. His destination is the most private part of the palace, accessible only to a select few. He reaches the privy chamber, the king's private receiving room, where yeoman guards stand watch. They recognize him immediately and step aside. The groom of the stool needs no announcement, no permission. He has the right of entry at any hour, a privilege that makes him both envied and resented by nearly everyone at court. Beyond the privy chamber lies the king's bedchamber, and beyond that, the most private room of all, the king's secret chamber, where the close stool is kept. Sir Thomas enters the secret chamber and begins his morning preparations. The room is small, but richly appointed, with tapestries covering the stone walls for warmth and privacy, a brazier burning to take the chill off the air, and in the corner, the close stool itself. The device is a remarkable piece of furniture, far removed from any modern toilet. It's essentially a wooden box covered in padded velvet crimson. Naturally, the royal color with a hinged lid that conceals the pewter bowl inside. The exterior is decorated with gilt leather and brass studs, more throne-like than toilet-like, a physical manifestation of the idea that even the king's most basic bodily functions should be surrounded by appropriate majesty. He checks the close stool's contents from the previous evening. The yeoman of the chamber would have emptied it after the king's final attendance last night. But Sir Thomas verifies this personally. Everything must be perfect. He ensures fresh herbs are scattered in the bowl to mask odors: lavender, rose petals, sage. He checks the supply of cleansing cloths, squares of fine linen, soft and clean, stored in a warming cabinet near the brazier, so they won't be cold against the royal skin. He prepares a basin of warmed water infused with rose petals and chamomile for washing the king's hands afterward. Everything must be ready, anticipating every need, because the king's comfort and dignity depend entirely on this preparation. The close stool represents a fascinating evolution in sanitation. For most people in 1536, toilet facilities are rudimentary at best: chamber pots emptied out windows, communal privies, or simply the outdoors. But royalty has always required something more private and comfortable. The close stool allows the king to relieve himself in the warmth and privacy of his chambers without venturing to cold stone guard robes or outdoor privies. It's portable, allowing it to be moved wherever the king travels, and its elaborate decoration transforms a humble biological necessity into an act of royal privilege. At 7 o'clock, Sir Thomas hears movement from the bedchamber. The king is stirring. He positions himself respectfully near the door, waiting. Moments later, the door opens, and King Henry VIII enters the secret chamber. He's an imposing figure despite his current state of undress, wearing only a nightshirt and a fur-lined robe, his famous red-gold hair uncombed, his beard untrimmed. At 44 years old, Henry is no longer the athletic young king who once jousted and hunted with legendary stamina. He's grown heavy, his face jowly, his body thick with the weight of middle age and declining health. But his presence remains commanding, his blue eyes sharp and quick to anger, his very posture radiating the authority of absolute monarchy. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says, bowing low. "Thomas," the king grunts, his tone neither friendly nor hostile, simply acknowledging. Henry moves stiffly toward the close stool, and Sir Thomas can see he's in pain this morning. The king suffers from a chronic leg ulcer, a wound from a jousting accident 4 years ago that never properly healed and now suppurates constantly, causing intense pain and limiting his mobility. The ulcer colors everything about Henry's life now: his moods, his health, his ability to move freely, and Sir Thomas must always be aware of how much pain the king is in as it affects how he should be approached. Sir Thomas assists the king in settling onto the close stool, arranging the robe for warmth and modesty, ensuring he's comfortable. This is the moment of greatest intimacy and greatest danger. The king is physically vulnerable, sitting on what amounts to a fancy toilet, his body engaged in its most basic function. Any other man would be embarrassed, would want privacy, would prefer to be alone. But royalty operates by different rules. The king cannot be left alone, even for this. And paradoxically, this moment of physical vulnerability is when Henry is often most emotionally open, when he speaks most freely about matters that trouble him. "My leg is abominable this morning," Henry says as he settles. "Barely slept for the pain of it. Those fool physicians with their poultices accomplish nothing. Nothing." "I am sorry to hear it, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas responds. His tone sympathetic, but not pitying. Pity would anger the king. Perhaps a different treatment might be tried. "I've heard that the physicians at Padua have new methods for treating such wounds." "Italian quacks," Henry mutters, but without much heat. He's silent for a moment, attending to his body's needs, and Sir Thomas waits respectfully, his eyes tactfully averted while remaining attentive. This is the art of his position, being present but not intrusive, available but not presumptuous, ready to respond to any need or conversational opening without forcing either. The silence stretches, broken only by the crackling of the brazier and the sounds of the king's digestion, sounds that would make most people uncomfortable, but which Sir Thomas has learned to accept as simply part of the work. Henry's digestive system is as troubled as his leg, prone to constipation that causes him great discomfort, alternating with bouts of looseness that are equally distressing. Part of Sir Thomas's duty is monitoring these functions, reporting anything unusual to the royal physicians, adjusting the king's diet based on what's observed. It's intimate medical care disguised as toilet attendance. "The Queen was cold to me again last night," Henry says suddenly, his voice bitter. He's referring to Anne Boleyn, his second wife, the woman for whom he broke with Rome and divided his kingdom. They've been married for 3 years now, and the passionate love that drove Henry to such extremes has curdled into resentment and suspicion. Anne has given him one living child, Princess Elizabeth, but no son, and in the brutal arithmetic of Tudor succession, daughters don't count. The king needs a male heir, and Anne has suffered multiple miscarriages, the most recent just this past January. The relationship is deteriorating rapidly, and Sir Thomas is one of the few people who hears Henry's unfiltered feelings about his wife. "I am sorry, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says carefully. "Speaking about the Queen is dangerous territory. Say too much against her, and you might be accused of treason. Say too little, and the king might think you're defending her against his complaints." These are difficult times for Her Majesty as well, mourning the loss of the child. "She shows me no warmth," Henry continues, as if Thomas hadn't spoken. "No wifely affection. She's sharp-tongued and contrary, and there are whispers." He trails off, but Sir Thomas knows exactly what whispers he means. Rumors are spreading about Anne's behavior, that she's too familiar with certain courtiers, that she's been seen in compromising situations, that her miscarriage might have been caused by infidelity rather than medical misfortune. The rumors are likely false, or at least greatly exaggerated, but in the poisonous atmosphere of the Tudor court, perception matters more than truth. Sir Thomas says nothing, knowing that silence is sometimes the wisest response. The king continues his morning ritual, and Sir Thomas waits, ready with warmed cloths when needed. This is perhaps the strangest aspect of his position, the actual physical service of cleaning the king after his bowel movement. It's work that sounds degrading, that would humiliate most men, but which Sir Thomas performs with neither embarrassment nor distaste. It's simply part of the service, and it's performed for a king, which transforms it from degrading to honorable. The logic seems backwards to modern sensibilities, but in the hierarchical world of Tudor England, serving the king personally in any capacity is an honor, and the more intimate the service, the greater the honor, because it demonstrates trust. He assists the king in standing, arranges his robe properly, and provides the warmed, cleansing cloths with practiced efficiency. Henry uses them, then moves to wash his hands in the prepared basin of rose-scented water. Sir Thomas examines the contents of the close stool quickly, a duty that might seem bizarre, but which is actually important medical observation. The color, consistency, and odor of the king's excrement provide information about his health. This morning, Sir Thomas notes that the king seems constipated again, producing little despite evident straining. He'll need to speak with the royal physicians about adjusting the king's diet, perhaps adding more fruits or recommending a mild purgative. "Your Majesty seemed troubled during the night," Sir Thomas observes, as he helps the king dry his hands on a linen towel. "Beyond the pain of your leg, I mean. Is there some matter of state that weighs upon your mind?" This is the other crucial aspect of his position, being more than a toilet attendant, more than a glorified nurse. The groom of the stool serves as confidant and advisor, someone the king can speak to freely, without the formality and caution that governs every other interaction. During these private morning hours, Henry can express doubts and fears and angers that he'd never voice in the council chamber or even to his closest ministers. And Sir Thomas, by listening carefully and responding thoughtfully, becomes a valuable political advisor, despite his title's humble origins. "I am surrounded by fools and traitors," Henry says darkly, settling into a chair by the brazier. He doesn't dismiss Sir Thomas, which means he wants to continue talking. "Cromwell tells me one thing, the bishops tell me another, and the Queen." He stops, his jaw tightening. "The Queen mocks me to her ladies. I hear reports of her laughter, her sharp words about my abilities as a husband." Sir Thomas feels a chill that has nothing to do with the April morning. This is dangerous talk, the kind that precedes disasters. He's heard whispers at court, seen the way Thomas Cromwell has been quietly investigating certain members of the Queen's household. Something is building, some storm that will break soon, and Sir Thomas is close enough to the center to be endangered by it. "Your Majesty is the anointed king," Sir Thomas says carefully. "Your judgment in all matters is superior to any subjects. If your Majesty has concerns about any person's loyalty, then those concerns must be investigated thoroughly." It's a carefully neutral statement that supports the king without actually accusing anyone. This is the tightrope walk that defines existence at the Tudor court, saying enough to show loyalty, but not so much that you commit yourself to a position that might prove fatal if circumstances change. Henry nods slowly, seemingly satisfied with this response. "You are loyal, Thomas. That's why you hold this position. I need men around me I can trust absolutely, men who won't betray me or mock me behind my back. Your Majesty has my complete loyalty, always," Sir Thomas responds. And it's true not because Henry is particularly lovable or just, but because disloyalty to the king is treason, and treason means death, not just for yourself but potentially for your entire family. Loyalty isn't a choice, it's survival. The king rises, ready to continue his morning routine. Sir Thomas assists him back to the bedchamber, where other attendants will help him dress in the elaborate clothing required for a day of royal business. His duty for this immediate moment is complete, but the morning attendance will repeat again in a few hours, and then again in the afternoon, and again in the evening. The king's troubled digestion means frequent visits to the close stool, and Sir Thomas must be ready for each one, perpetually available, constantly attentive. As he leaves the king's private chambers, Sir Thomas reflects on the strange privilege and burden of his position. He's just spent an hour attending to the king's bowel movement and listening to complaints about the queen work that sounds absurd when described. And yet, he's also received intelligence about the political situation that few others possess. He knows the king's true feelings about Anne Boleyn. He knows that something dangerous is developing, and that knowledge is power, the kind of power that courtiers spend their lives trying to obtain. The church bells ring 8 times across the palace grounds, marking the hour. Sir Thomas has other duties to attend to now, other aspects of his position that extend far beyond toilet attendance. After leaving the king's chambers, Sir Thomas makes his way to his own office, a small but well-appointed room in the palace's administrative section, where he conducts the financial and administrative duties that actually consume most of his working hours. The Groom of the Stool's responsibilities extend far beyond attending the king's bowel movements. He manages the privy purse, the king's personal finances separate from the official state treasury. He oversees the staff of the privy chamber, the gentlemen and grooms who attend the king in his private apartments. He reviews correspondence marked for the king's personal attention, and he serves as a gatekeeper, controlling who gets private access to the monarch and under what circumstances. The office's desk is covered with documents requiring his attention, accounts from the master of the horse for the king's stables, requests from various courtiers for appointments with His Majesty, letters from foreign ambassadors marked personal and private, and the daily accounting of the privy purse's expenditures and receipts. Sir Thomas settles into his chair and begins working through the papers with practiced efficiency. His clerk, a discreet young man named William, assisting with the more routine matters. The privy purse is substantial, funded by various sources including rents from royal properties, fees from patents and monopolies granted by the king, and occasionally transfers from the main treasury. Managing these funds requires careful accounting, as every penny must be tracked, and the king is surprisingly attentive to his personal finances, despite his legendary extravagance. This month's accounts show expenditures for new horses, repairs to several of the king's personal chambers, costly fabrics for new clothing, gambling debts. Henry is an enthusiastic but not particularly skilled gambler, and several gifts to courtiers in favor. There's also a significant sum marked confidential payment, which Sir Thomas knows refers to money provided to Thomas Cromwell's investigators looking into the Queen's household. These payments don't appear in any official accounting and will eventually be disguised as something innocuous, but they represent the practical reality of political intrigue. Information costs money, informants must be paid, witnesses incentivized, and investigators compensated. And these funds flow through Sir Thomas's hands, making him intimately aware of the king's priorities and plans. His work is interrupted by a knock at the door. William opens it to reveal Sir Francis Weston, a young gentleman of the Privy Chamber and one of the Queen's favorites. Weston is perhaps 25 years old, handsome and charming, from a good family but without great fortune or prospects beyond what royal favor might bring. He's exactly the kind of ambitious young courtier who surrounds royalty, hoping that proximity and service might lead to advancement. "Sir Thomas," Weston says with an elegant bow, "forgive the intrusion. I was hoping I might have a word." Sir Thomas gestures for him to enter, signals William to leave them private. Weston is pleasant company, witty and cultured, but this visit isn't social. No one seeks out the Groom of the Stool casually. Every interaction is calculated, pursuing some advantage. "What can I do for you, Francis?" Sir Thomas asks, keeping his tone friendly but not overly warm. "I was hoping." Weston hesitates, choosing his words carefully. "I was hoping you might mention to His Majesty that I would be honored to accompany him on the hunting expedition planned for next week. I know the party is already selected, but if there should be an opening, I would very much value the opportunity." There it is, the request for access, for the king's attention and favor. A hunting expedition with the king means days of close proximity, opportunities for conversation and service, chances to be noticed and appreciated. Being included in the king's intimate circle is the pathway to advancement, and Sir Thomas controls that access. "The hunting party is quite full," Sir Thomas says neutrally. "His Majesty prefers a small group for better sport." "I understand, of course," Weston says quickly. "But if you might simply mention my name, suggest that I'm available if needed." He pauses, then adds, "I would be very grateful for your assistance in this matter." The implication is clear enough. Gratitude would be expressed tangibly, probably in the form of money or favors. This is how the system works. Courtiers seeking access pay the gatekeepers, and the Groom of the Stool is the ultimate gatekeeper to the king's private life. Sir Thomas could supplement his already considerable income substantially through such payments. and many men in his position do exactly that. But Sir Thomas has always been cautious about accepting such arrangements. Taking money for access creates obligations, and obligations are dangerous when the king's mood can shift without warning. More importantly, if Henry ever learned that his groom of the Stool was selling access, the punishment would be severe. Trust is the foundation of the position, and anything that compromises that trust is potentially fatal. "I'll mention you were interested," Sir Thomas says finally, "but I make no promises, and I expect no payment for simply passing along your request. If His Majesty chooses to include you, it will be on your own merits." Weston looks momentarily disappointed. He'd clearly hoped for a more transactional arrangement, but he masks it quickly. "Of course, Sir Thomas. I would expect nothing less from a man of your integrity. Thank you for your consideration." After Weston leaves, Sir Thomas reflects on the interaction. It's one of dozens of similar conversations he has every week. Courtiers seeking his influence, angling for advantage, trying to use his proximity to the king for their own purposes. Some are more subtle than Weston, some more blatant, but all recognize the fundamental truth. The groom of the Stool's power derives entirely from intimacy with the monarch, from those hours each day when he's alone with the king during the most private moments. The irony isn't lost on Sir Thomas that his greatest power comes from his most humble service. If he were merely a financial administrator or correspondence secretary, he'd be respected, but not particularly influential. But because he attends the king during bowel movements, because he's present during those unguarded moments when Henry is simply a man dealing with his body's needs, he has access and influence that the highest nobles envy. The morning passes in a flurry of administrative work. He reviews a request from the Master of the Wardrobe for funds to commission new clothing for the king. Henry is growing larger as his health declines, and his existing wardrobe no longer fits properly. He reads correspondence from the king's illegitimate son, the Duke of Richmond, asking for increased allowance. He approves payment for repairs to Hampton Court's privy chambers, where water damage has affected some of the wall tapestries. Each decision is small, but collectively they represent substantial financial and administrative power. At 11 o'clock, a page arrives with a summons. The king requires his attendance again. Sir Thomas immediately sets aside his work and makes his way back to the royal chambers. The midday attendance is often necessary, as the king's digestive troubles typically intensify through the morning. He finds Henry in obvious discomfort, pacing awkwardly in the privy chamber, his face flushed and his temper short. "Finally!" Henry snaps when Sir Thomas enters. "Where have you been?" "I came immediately upon being summoned, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says calmly, not pointing out that the page only just delivered the message. The king's irritability when in digestive distress is well known, and Sir Thomas has learned not to take it personally. He escorts Henry to the secret chamber, assists him onto the close stool, and settles in for what he expects will be a difficult attendance. The king is clearly constipated, straining uncomfortably, his face reddening with effort. Sir Thomas maintains his calm demeanor, offering quiet reassurances and fetching a cup of wine that sometimes helps the king relax enough for his body to function properly. "This damned leg," Henry mutters, "and now my bowels betray me as well. What good is being king if my own body rebels against me?" "Your Majesty has been under considerable strain," Sir Thomas observes. "Both your leg and your digestion often worsen during times of worry or trouble. Perhaps if your Majesty could find some ease of mind." "Ease of mind?" Henry barks out a bitter laugh. "How am I to have ease of mind when I'm surrounded by traitors and fools? When my wife shows me no loyalty? When even my own body fails me?" The king's anger is palpable, and Sir Thomas recognizes that this is about more than physical discomfort. Henry is approaching a crisis, political, personal, and physical, all converging. The Queen is in danger, though she probably doesn't realize how much. The king's health is declining, making him more irritable and paranoid, and the pressure to produce a male heir weighs on everything, coloring every decision and relationship. Your Majesty has loyal servants who would do anything in your service, Sir Thomas says carefully. Whatever burdens you carry, you do not carry them alone. It's the right thing to say. Henry's face softens slightly, and he reaches out to clasp Sir Thomas's shoulder, a gesture of affection and trust that's both genuine and calculated, as everything about royal favor must be. You're a good man, Thomas, Henry says, one of the few I can truly trust. You see me at my weakest, my most vulnerable, and you've never betrayed that trust. That's worth more than all the flattery and fine words of the rest of the court combined. Sir Thomas bows his head, accepting the compliment while recognizing its burden. Being trusted by Henry VIII is dangerous, the king's trust is fickle, and today's favorite can become tomorrow's traitor with shocking speed. But it's also necessary for survival. Without the king's trust, he'd be dismissed from his position, exiled from court, stripped of his income and influence. Everything depends on maintaining that trust, on being useful enough to keep, but not threatening enough to destroy. The king finally achieves success in his bowel movement. Sir Thomas diplomatically doesn't comment on the effort required, and they go through the familiar ritual of cleansing and washing. Sir Thomas notes that the king's constipation continues to be a problem and resolves to speak with the royal physicians about adjusting his diet. Perhaps more prunes, fewer heavy meats, better balance of humors. The medical theory of the time attributes most illness to imbalance in the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and digestion is seen as central to maintaining that balance. As Henry washes his hands, he seems more relaxed, the physical relief easing some of his emotional tension. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, he mentions, about investigating thoroughly any concerns about loyalty. Sir Thomas's heart quickens, but he keeps his expression neutral. Yes, Your Majesty. Cromwell is already pursuing certain inquiries, Henry says, his tone casual but his eyes sharp, into matters concerning the Queen's household. I expect those inquiries will bear fruit soon, very soon. It's a warning and a confidence, shared in this private moment. The investigation into Anne Boleyn is advancing, and something significant is about to happen. Sir Thomas doesn't ask for details. Knowing too much can be as dangerous as knowing too little, but the information is valuable. He now knows that a storm is coming, and he can prepare accordingly, ensuring he's positioned on the right side when it breaks. Your Majesty's wisdom in all matters is unquestionable, Sir Thomas says. Whatever Your Majesty decides, it will be just and right. Henry nods, satisfied with this response. He allows Sir Thomas to help him adjust his clothing, then dismisses him with a wave. The midday attendance is complete, and Sir Thomas returns to his office, his mind racing with the implications of what he's just heard. The bells ring noon across the palace, marking the hour. Sir Thomas has several more hours before the next attendance, time to continue his administrative work and to think very carefully about the dangerous weeks ahead. The afternoon brings a meeting that Sir Thomas has been anticipating with equal parts interest and apprehension. At 2 o'clock, he meets with Dr. William Butts, the king's principal physician, in a small consultation room adjacent to the royal apothecary. Dr. Butts is a learned man, educated at Cambridge and experienced in treating the complex ailments that plague the king's aging body. He and Sir Thomas have developed a close working relationship over the years, as the Groom of the Stool's observations are essential for understanding the king's health. Good afternoon, Sir Thomas, Dr. Butts greets him. The physician is perhaps 50 years old, gray-haired and scholarly, with the careful manner of someone who knows his patient could have him executed if the treatment goes wrong. I understand. His Majesty continues to experience difficulties with his digestion. Indeed, Sir Thomas confirms. This morning he was severely constipated, requiring considerable effort and time. His discomfort was evident, and it worsened his temper considerably. Dr. Butts nods, making notes on a wax tablet. And the consistency when he does manage to evacuate? The color? Any blood or mucus? This conversation, which would be grotesquely intimate in any other context, is purely medical here. Sir Thomas provides detailed observations from the past week, describing everything he's noticed about the king's bowel movements. In an era before laboratory tests or sophisticated diagnostics, such observations are the primary way physicians monitor their patients' health. The constipation is concerning, Dr. Butts says thoughtfully. His Majesty's humors are clearly imbalanced, too much melancholy, not enough choler. The leg ulcer drains off some of the bad humors, which is actually beneficial, but his diet is working against us. Too much red meat, too much wine, not enough fruits or vegetables. Can you convince him to change his diet? Sir Thomas asks, already knowing the answer. Dr. Butts sighs. His Majesty believes that rich foods are his right as king. He associates plain food with poverty or penance. But perhaps, he pauses, thinking, perhaps if we frame it as strengthening his virility, his ability to father children, that might motivate him more than mere health concerns. It's a shrewd insight. Henry is obsessed with producing a male heir, and anything that might improve his chances of doing so would be embraced eagerly. The king's declining health has affected his ability to perform maritally, something he's deeply ashamed of and desperate to remedy. I could mention it during tomorrow's morning attendance, Sir Thomas suggests, when he's speaking freely, without the formality of a medical consultation. He's more receptive to suggestions in those private moments. This is another aspect of Sir Thomas's value. He can deliver recommendations in casual conversation that would be rejected if they came from physicians in formal audience. The intimacy of the toilet attendants creates a space for honest discussion that exists nowhere else in the rigid hierarchy of the Tudor court. They continue discussing various treatments, herbal purgatives to ease the constipation, dietary adjustments, poultices for the leg ulcer that continues to suppurate and cause pain. Dr. Butts is also concerned about the king's weight gain and declining mobility, but those are delicate subjects that must be approached carefully. One other matter, Dr. Butts says, lowering his voice despite their privacy. I've heard rumors that His Majesty is looking elsewhere for companionship, that he's paying attention to one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, a Mistress Jane Seymour. Sir Thomas nods slowly. This is true, though not widely known yet. Henry has been showing marked attention to Jane Seymour, a young woman from a good family who serves in the Queen's household. She's everything Anne Boleyn is not: quiet, demure, submissive, and notably from a family with proven fertility. She's one of 10 children. Henry sees in her the possibility of the obedient wife and mother of sons that Anne has failed to be. If His Majesty's affections are engaged elsewhere, Dr. Butts continues carefully, it would explain some of his difficulties with the Queen. The body responds to the heart, after all. If he no longer desires her, then his virility would naturally be affected in her presence. It's a tactful way of saying that Henry can't perform with Anne because he no longer wants her, and that sexual dysfunction is driving some of his anger toward her, creating a vicious cycle where his inability feeds his resentment, which further diminishes his ability. These matters are beyond my expertise, Sir Thomas says diplomatically, but I will certainly monitor His Majesty's spirits and health and report anything of concern. After the consultation with Dr. Butts, Sir Thomas returns to his office to find several courtiers waiting to see him. Word has spread, as it always does at court, that something significant is developing regarding the Queen. People are choosing sides, positioning themselves, trying to ensure they're not caught on the wrong side of whatever storm is coming. The first visitor is Sir Edward Seymour, brother to Jane Seymour, the young woman who's caught the king's eye. Edward is ambitious and calculating, recognizing that his sister's potential elevation could advance the entire Seymour family. He's come to feel out Sir Thomas's position, to see if the Groom of the Stool might be an ally in whatever plays out. Sir Thomas, Edward says with excessive courtesy, I trust I'm not intruding on your valuable time. Not at all, Sir Edward. How may I assist you? I simply wanted to ensure you knew that my family stands ready to serve His Majesty in whatever capacity he requires. We are loyal, discreet, and eager to provide whatever comfort or assistance might be needed. The message is clear enough. The Seymours are positioning themselves as alternatives to the Boleyns, ready to step into favor if the Queen falls. And they're letting Sir Thomas know this, both as courtesy and as an invitation to join their side. Every loyal subject wishes to serve His Majesty well. Sir Thomas responds carefully. I'm certain your family's devotion is sincere and will be recognized appropriately. It's a neutral response that commits to nothing, and Edward Seymour is too experienced a courtier to push further. He's planted his flag, made his position known, and now he'll wait to see how events unfold. After Seymour leaves, Sir Thomas reflects on the delicate game he's playing. He knows the king plans to move against Anne Boleyn. He knows that Jane Seymour is being positioned as a replacement. He knows that fortunes are about to shift dramatically. But he must be careful not to move too early or too obviously. The groom of the stool should appear above the fray, loyal only to the king personally, not to any faction or family. His power derives from perceived neutrality, from being the king's man rather than anyone else's. The afternoon attendance comes at 4 o'clock, earlier than usual. A page summons him urgently. The king is in distress again. Sir Thomas hurries to the royal chambers and finds Henry in obvious pain, his face pale and sweating, his leg ulcer apparently having broken open and soaked through the bandages. The combination of the leg pain and his digestive discomfort has left the king in a foul temper. "Where have you been?" Henry snaps, though Sir Thomas arrived within minutes of being summoned. "Here now, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says calmly. "Let me help you." He assists the king to the close stool, noting that Henry's hands are trembling, whether from pain, anger, or something else. He can't tell. The attendance is difficult, with the king unable to relax enough for his bowels to function properly. Sir Thomas maintains a soothing presence, offering quiet reassurances, fetching wine, adjusting cushions, doing everything possible to ease the king's physical and emotional distress. "I am trapped in this failing body," Henry says bitterly, "trapped and betrayed by everyone. My wife, my courtiers, even my own flesh rebels against me. Your Majesty bears burdens that would crush lesser men," Sir Thomas says softly. "But you are strong, stronger than these temporary afflictions." "Temporary?" Henry laughs harshly. "This leg will never heal. My body grows more treacherous by the day. And yet I must appear strong, must project power and authority. When inside I feel like—" He trails off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. It's a moment of profound vulnerability, the king admitting fears he'd never voice anywhere else. And this is perhaps the truest value of Sir Thomas's position, not the financial management or the correspondence review or even the toilet attendance itself, but these moments of honest human connection when the king can drop his mask and simply be a man in pain and fear. "You are strong, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says with genuine conviction. "Whatever troubles plague you now, you will overcome them. You always have." The king reaches out and grasps Sir Thomas's hand, holding it tightly, a gesture of desperate need for human contact and reassurance. They remain like that for several long moments, monarch and servant, man and man, connected by the intimate vulnerability of the moment. Eventually, Henry releases his hand and manages a weak smile. "You're a good man, Thomas. I don't tell you that often enough." "Serving Your Majesty is my greatest honor," Sir Thomas responds. And in this moment, it's true. The attendance concludes, with Sir Thomas assisting the king in cleansing and washing, then helping him to a chair where his leg can be rebandaged by the waiting physicians. As he leaves the royal chambers, Sir Thomas reflects on the strange privilege and burden of his position. He's seen the most powerful man in England reduced to tears by pain and fear. He's held the king's hand during a moment of profound weakness. And tomorrow, that same king might order the execution of his wife and several courtiers without a second thought. Power and vulnerability, strength and weakness, intimacy and danger, they're all intertwined in the life of the groom of the stool, inseparable and defining. The evening attendance comes at 7 o'clock, after the king has dined in the privy chamber with a small group of favored courtiers. Sir Thomas waits in the secret chamber, the close stool prepared, the brazier keeping the room warm against the April evening chill. He can hear voices from the privy chamber, the king's deeper tones mixed with higher voices of the gentlemen attending him, but can't make out specific words. The laughter sounds forced, the kind of careful merriment that characterizes court gatherings when everyone is slightly afraid and trying not to show it. When Henry enters the secret chamber, he's alone, having dismissed the others. His face is flushed from wine and dinner, but his eyes are sharp and calculating. The evening attendance is often when the king is most talkative, his tongue loosened by alcohol but his mind still active, working through problems and plans. "Close the door," Henry instructs, and Sir Thomas does so, sealing them in privacy. "I want to speak freely, without fear of being overheard." "Of course, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says, assisting the king onto the close stool. "Anything you say here remains between us, always." "I know, Thomas. That's why we're here." Henry settles onto the close stool and sighs heavily. "I am about to do something that will shock the realm, something necessary, but difficult nonetheless." Sir Thomas says nothing, waiting. The king clearly wants to unburden himself, to speak freely about whatever he's planning, and the groom of the stool's role in these moments is to listen, not to judge or advise unless asked. "The Queen has betrayed me," Henry says flatly. "She has committed adultery with multiple men of my court. She has conspired against me, plotted with her lovers, perhaps even plotted against my life. The evidence is overwhelming." Sir Thomas knows this is almost certainly false. The evidence will be extracted confessions from men tortured by Thomas Cromwell's investigators, or twisted interpretations of innocent conversations, or outright fabrications. But it doesn't matter whether it's true. What matters is that the king believes it, or has convinced himself to believe it, because he wants to be free of Anne and marry Jane Seymour. "This is grave news indeed, Your Majesty," Sir Thomas says carefully. "If true, it is the most heinous treason." "It is true," Henry insists. "Cromwell has uncovered everything. Within days, perhaps a week, the arrests will be made. The Queen and her alleged lovers will be taken to the Tower, tried, and executed." He pauses, then adds, "I will be free to marry again, to find a wife who will give me the sons I need, who will be loyal and obedient as a wife should be." The word "alleged" is interesting. Even the king seems to recognize on some level that the accusations may not be entirely solid. But he's committed to this course now, and in Tudor England, once the machinery of treason prosecution starts moving, it's nearly impossible to stop. "How do you feel about this, Thomas?" Henry asks suddenly. "Speak honestly. Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" It's a test, of course. Everything with Henry is a test. The wrong answer could mean disaster. Too enthusiastic in supporting the Queen's destruction might make the king suspicious of why he's so eager, but too reluctant might suggest sympathy with traitors. "I think Your Majesty must do what you believe is necessary for the realm and for your peace of mind," Sir Thomas says slowly. "If the Queen has betrayed you, then justice demands punishment. If you have doubts about her loyalty, then you cannot continue the marriage in good conscience. And if Your Majesty believes another wife might provide the male heirs the kingdom needs, then you must follow that path." It's a carefully balanced response that supports the king's decision without explicitly endorsing the specific accusations, that focuses on Henry's needs rather than Anne's guilt. Henry nods thoughtfully. "You understand, Thomas. You always understand. This isn't about hatred or cruelty, it's about necessity. I need a son. England needs an heir. And I cannot get that from Anne Boleyn." The king's bowel movement proceeds. He's finally managing to relieve himself after the day's constipation, and Sir Thomas notes with quiet satisfaction that the evening success suggests the digestive system is beginning to function better. Perhaps the dietary suggestions are having some effect, or perhaps it's simply the natural variation of the king's troubled digestion. As Sir Thomas assists with the cleansing, Henry continues talking, almost compulsively, as if needing to justify his decision to someone. I loved her once, truly loved her. I broke with Rome for her, risked everything, and she's repaid my love with betrayal and mockery." His voice hardens. "She laughed about me with her ladies, made jokes about my abilities as a man, that I could forgive, perhaps. But sleeping with others? Plotting with them? That is treason, pure and simple." Sir Thomas hands the king a towel, helps him to wash. "Your Majesty's honor must be defended. No man, king or commoner, should endure such betrayal." "No," Henry agrees. "No man should." He stands, allows Sir Thomas to arrange his clothing properly. "When the arrests happen, there will be chaos at court. Some of her faction will protest, will claim innocence. I need men I can trust absolutely to remain steady, to support the crown regardless of the turmoil." "I am your Majesty's man, always," Sir Thomas says firmly. "Whatever happens, my loyalty is to you personally, not to any faction or family." "Good. That's what I needed to hear." Henry grasps Sir Thomas's shoulder in that familiar gesture of affection and trust. "You've been with me through so much, through illnesses and triumphs, through private moments no one else sees. You know me better than anyone, Thomas. You see me at my weakest and never judge, never betray that trust. That's worth more than all the armies and treasuries in Christendom. It's perhaps the most genuine expression of appreciation Henry has ever offered, and Sir Thomas feels the weight of it. The king is right. He does know Henry more intimately than anyone, has seen him vulnerable and weak and frightened, has held his hand during moments of pain and despair. That intimacy has created a bond that's both precious and dangerous, a connection that could save him or destroy him, depending on the king's shifting moods. "Serving your Majesty is my life's purpose," Sir Thomas says simply. After Henry leaves, returning to his bedchamber for the night, Sir Thomas remains in the secret chamber, tidying up, preparing for tomorrow's attendance. He empties the close stool's contents into a chamber pot that will be carried to the castle's waste disposal system. Even royal excrement must eventually be dealt with, though several layers of servants stand between the king and that ultimate reality. As he works, Sir Thomas reflects on everything he's heard today. The king is about to move against Anne Boleyn, arresting and likely executing her and several members of her household. Among those who'll fall will be Sir Henry Norris, one of Anne's supposed lovers, who also happens to be Groom of the Stool to Anne herself, yes. Queens had their own Grooms of the Stool, female attendants who performed similar duties. Norris will almost certainly be executed, a stark reminder of the danger that comes from being too close to power. Sir Thomas has survived where others have fallen because he's maintained careful neutrality, because he's positioned himself as the king's man rather than the servant of any faction. But that neutrality is constantly under threat, constantly tested. One wrong word, one perceived disloyalty, and he could follow Norris to the scaffold. The evening is fully dark now. The April night settled over Hampton Court. Sir Thomas completes his preparations and makes his way through the palace's corridors to his own chambers. The palace is quieter at night, with most courtiers retired to their rooms, though guards still patrol and servants still work in the kitchens and stables. He passes the chapel, where a few candles still burn, and offers a brief prayer for the king's health, for his own safety, and for the souls of those who are about to fall. In his chambers, his servant helps him undress, removing the elaborate layers of Tudor clothing. As he settles into bed, Sir Thomas thinks about the strange life he leads, the peculiar honor of his position. He attends the king's bowel movements, wipes the royal bottom, manages personal finances and correspondence. Work that sounds absurd, that would be degrading for anyone else, but which makes him one of the most powerful men at court because it brings him into daily, intimate contact with the monarch. Power flows from intimacy, he reflects, not from grand titles or public ceremony, but from those quiet, private moments when the king is vulnerable and needs someone he can trust. The Groom of the Stool holds power because he's there when the king cannot maintain the royal facade, when Henry is simply a man dealing with his body's needs and his soul's fears. And with that power comes danger. Sir Thomas is closer to the king than almost anyone, which means he's also closer to the king's wrath if anything goes wrong. He knows too much, sees too much, has too much influence. And in the paranoid world of Tudor politics, being too valuable can be as dangerous as being worthless. As he drifts towards sleep, Sir Thomas's last thought is of Anne Boleyn, sleeping somewhere in the palace, unaware that within days she'll be arrested, and within weeks she'll be dead. She was queen, crowned and anointed, the woman for whom Henry broke with Rome and divided his kingdom, and now she'll fall because she failed to provide a son and because the king wants someone else. If a queen can fall so far so fast, then a groom of the Stool certainly can as well. But tomorrow morning, he'll rise again, prepare the close stool again, attend the king during his morning bowel movement again. He'll listen to Henry's complaints and fears and plans, offer quiet counsel and unwavering loyalty, and continue walking the tightrope that defines life at the Tudor court, because this is his position, his responsibility, and his strange privilege to be the man who attends the king's most intimate needs, and through that service, wields power that nobles and bishops envy. The church bells toll midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. Somewhere in the palace, the king sleeps, his troubled body resting until morning brings new pain and new demands. And the groom of the Stool sleeps as well, ready to wake before dawn and begin the cycle again, attending to the most powerful man in England during his most vulnerable moments, holding close the secrets and fears and plans that flow from intimacy with power.